All right, Kelly from the White House. Let's bring in Democratic Congressman John Garamendi of California. He sits on the House Armed Services Committee and the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. Congressman, with welcome to you, sir. Let's start with these new comments from former Trump advisor Roger Stone, where it sounds like he's saying that his tweet about Clinton campaign chair John Podesta and then the subsequent revelation that John Podesta's email being hacked was a coincidence. Do you think that's possible?
No. No, I don't think it's possible at all. I think a whole lot of people are scrambling to get underneath the rock and hide as best they can. We need to understand here that this is an investigation underway for the last almost a year now by the intelligence agencies after they became aware of the attempt by the Russians, or not attempt, but the fact that the Russians had actually hacked into the DNC and also into many other accounts. So that investigation was underway, and guess what they found? Along the way, they found a whole lot of the Trump folks talking to Russians. And yes, that eventually became news. There's going to be a lot of new things that are going to be coming out. I found this just to be almost hilarious as these people scramble to protect themselves. We need to know exactly what they said. Was there a deal? Was there a quid pro quo? And if so, that's an enormous crime against the American democracy. Whether it's a felony or not, we'll find out later. But by God, these people clearly were talking to the Russians in multiple places, not only the ambassador, but other folks. And you take a look at Manafort. This guy is so tied to the Russians that I'm surprised that he's not handcuffed to him. Maybe he will eventually be. But in any case, it's almost laughable the way they're trying to spin this thing in a new direction. The facts are there. The Russians did. Go ahead.
Do you, sir, think that the content of what was said, were that to get out, will Trump, if you will, the concerns that many are calling for with regard to the unmasking of the names? I mean, if what is said is explosive enough, will then the rest of it all fall by the wayside?
Well, the unmasking of the names, what exactly is that? We have known for a long time that there were certain people in the Trump's campaign that were connected to the Russians. It was discussed on national media, in the press, in Breitbart, and many other places, that certain members of the Trump campaign, shall we start with Manafort, had connections to the Russians. Was there an unmasking? It's been public knowledge. Stone and others, public knowledge that they had communicated with the Russians in multiple ways. What we need to know, and this is why we have to have an independent investigative body, is exactly what was discussed. And was there a quid pro quo during the course of the American presidency campaign with the Trump organization somehow coordinated with the Russians? There is circumstantial evidence, as the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee has so carefully laid out. Now, is there something beyond circumstances here? Well, we need to find out. We really must find out.
Let's take a listen to another clip of Roger Stone and what he said earlier. Here it is.
In America, we're supposed to have a chance to see the evidence against us and face our accusers. I'm very anxious to do that. If Mr. Page and Mr. Manafort do the same thing, frankly, I think the whole Russian meme, which really starts as a Clinton campaign press release, is finally put to bed. There is no collusion, and at least none that I know about, in Donald Trump's campaign for president.
Do you think this is all going to be put to bed, as he says, if they all testify, and only under the auspices of testifying under oath?
Well, I think there's a whole lot to this. Certainly we want them to testify under oath, and my guess is they're going to find themselves in a very precarious situation. Certainly Mr. Manafort will. But beyond that, this is why there has to be an independent investigation outside of the politics of the Congress, outside of the politics of the Senate. It is extraordinarily important. Is there collusion? Is there a crime committed? Well, let's find out. And yes, testify under oath, that's a good starting point. I'm quite sure that the FBI's questions to these gentlemen have raised some issues. You want to get in trouble? Don't tell the FBI the truth. Let's see what you have to say under oath. Don't tell the truth, you're going to be in serious trouble. There's going to be a lot that needs to be done here, and it needs to be done quickly, but very, very carefully and in the most nonpartisan, non-political way possible, because we're talking about the very essence of the American democracy. That is the electoral process.
Representative Garamendi, I know that you, sir, sit on the Armed Services Committee.
Yes.
Are you at all concerned when you hear about the U.S. military saying that it might be responsible for the deaths of civilians in a strike against ISIS in the Iraqi city of Mosul? We have the U.S. military. Is it at risk now of overextending itself again in Iraq and Syria?
Well, there's two things here. First of all, clearly the United States military is involved in various bombing campaigns in and around Mosul and many other places, Syria, as well as other parts of Iraq. And when you're bombing, there's a probability, and I use the word probability, not a possibility, a probability that there will be what is in a colloquial called collateral damage. In other words, non-combatants. That's always possible. Now, yes, there needs to be an investigation. We need to understand exactly what happened. Can it be prevented in the future? Those are very important questions, and I'm confident the military will look into that in detail and make whatever adjustments are appropriate. Beyond that, you also raised the question of the level of American involvement in Iraq and certainly also in Syria. Yes, it's being ramped up. Yes, we are on a slippery slope. How far down that slippery slope we will slide as more and more military find their way into those conflicts, it's a concern. But there's a larger concern here, and that is the fact that the Congress of the United States has not taken up its responsibility to declare war, or as we now call it, an authorization to use military force. It's very, very big. We're basing all of our action in those areas on the 2003 authorization, actually 2002 authorization, to go after al-Qaeda and related entities in Afghanistan. We're now involved in conflicts in many, many parts of the world based upon that. That's not right. Later, next week, Representative Walter Jones, a Republican, and I are going to push this thing one step forward to try to force the Congress of the United States to accept its constitutional responsibility to declare war or authorization to use force, and also to control the funds that are necessary to control that. Make the administration, new administration, come forward, explain to the Congress, explain to the American public exactly what its intentions are, what is required of us in terms of money, personnel, and lives to conduct that program. Thus far, they have not done so. They must do so, and we, the representatives of the American people, must accept our responsibilities and either, okay, Mr. President, go forward with our blessings, or, well, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's up to us, and it's also up to the president.
A lot of discussion on that very sensitive topic, as you well know. From California, Democratic Congressman John Garamendi. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex.